How do you see yourself amplifying the voices of students of color on campus, of folks that might not be in circles, that might have influence on campus?
Yeah.
How do you see sort of that playing out?
So like, at least for me, one thing like we're trying to work on as a fraternity right now, since I'm on the e-board of it, is bringing in fraternity men of color, different backgrounds, and just talking to our guys in a very casual setting. Just it doesn't have to be like a big whole planned thing.
Yeah.
Just having those little conversations, or just one-on-one talking with my guys, especially those guys who maybe are quieter or bubbled from a certain background, and really don't get involved with social media or activism or any of that. Just having those little conversations.
You know, kind of touching on that, like being, you know, like a faculty or like staff member, like how do you think this new like wave of change, creating more diverse, inclusive places, like having these conversations, like how has that affected you?
I think this whole shift since March, since we've left campus for COVID, and I think since George Floyd, me in my position as a director of multicultural education, I've seen some of that performance, right, that performative come to my office, where folks are trying to do different things, where, you know, they're trying to do different programs that they never would have tried to do before. Because one, we have to think about Quinnipiac in the public eye, but two, I have to think about it from a standpoint of what's serving the student body, right? And how I'm trying to sort of move the needle in terms of cultural intelligence for you guys. The different programs that were coming to us, I'm like, that's not gonna serve anyone. You're bringing this here because you feel bad about what's going on. It's a double-edged sword,
And
though.
that's
It's
so
like,
weird.
do you push the issue,
Yeah.
right, while you have the energy behind it right now?
Yeah.
Or do you say we're the university of the future and just wait for that to happen? So I think some people took advantage of that. As we have this energy, this newfound fervor to change America, whatever this might be,
Yeah.
right? I think some people definitely took advantage of that. I think some people had to be careful because they were using the student voice to push along their agendas.
Yeah.
And students might not necessarily see that as they're trying to get things across to the administration. You know, we can talk about demographics of faculty and staff. We can talk about demographics of students and how that needs to change. We can talk about how diversity doesn't necessarily mean having to lower your standards, right? We can just put the focus of energy into very, very high achieving students of color. You might have to put more resources behind those things, but the university was trying to put out plans that had action attached to them. So moves like Kalila Brown Dean now working with our office to move forward this 10-point plan for advancing racial justice, right? That's direct resources that are coming to our office to assist us and Don Sawyer, our VP of Equity and Inclusion, to move these things forward. These plans without action, that's where universities fail. I think people need to realize this takes time. We're not gonna wake up tomorrow and open up 50 new tenured positions for faculty of color. That's not how it works, right? We have a certain set of tenured positions. We have to recruit into those. Faculty have to retire from those. But that doesn't mean that we can't hire assistant or associate professors of color for positions that are open. So you have to pay attention to the data as well. But that tells us that we should start putting our resources into these recruitment places. But again, it's not just the recruitment. It's how do you keep people here? It's how you retain folks. And I'm not only talking about staff or faculty. I'm talking about students as well. Derek sat here on our last segment and talked about, as a first-year student, you know, he identifies as a male of color. As a first-year student during his first semester, he wanted to transfer because he didn't feel like he belonged. That's an issue, right? So we need to change the student experience for students of color here on campus, and that takes all of us.
I think something that's important to remember is regardless of how well you may have assimilated to QU, you're hyper aware of the fact that you're different. Like my parents, they moved to Boston from the Philippines, so I was their first child here. Even though they tried to really give me like an American upbringing, I was still always aware of how different it was from all my friends. So regardless of how well you fit in, that's still something that you're constantly thinking about, and how your upbringing and your views are so different from the people that you still live with every day.
And we spend a lot of time talking about what it means to bring your full authentic self to these spaces, right? As we're trying to figure out, I mean, it's hard enough that you guys are trying to figure out who you are as adults, as young adults. Once you start digging into your own identity and how you're operating in these spaces and how much of yourself, you know, you have to kind of put to the side, or can I bring my complete self and be accepted? You know, so those are the things that we need to think about in our smaller circles.
I don't know if you like thought about that, or like did you have any like thoughts about like the issues you might face or things that might come up, you know, being like an Asian identifying student, like coming back to university like mid-COVID?
I definitely have had those personal experiences where like I'll be at the gym, I'll have my mask on and I'll cough just a little bit and then I'll get a dirty look. So it's definitely made me extremely aware, just because before coronavirus, it very much felt like Asians were kind of on the back burner. Like even with the police brutality protests, it was very much just white versus black. It wasn't really talking about the middle ground. That's another part of it. It's just like when the president is very much blaming it on China and also kind of downplaying the severity of it. Like back in March, I was treated as, get away from me, you have Rona. And then now the narrative has shifted to like, why did you bring this over here? This is ruining everything.
Yeah, like you said, it's inherently so unfair and unjust. But like, how do you internalize that? How do you break that down? Like, how does that make you feel? Like,
it's very hard to break down because it's such a unique time. It's very, the largest thing that has stuck out to me about society was just overall how individualistic we are. The biggest issue that I want to tackle is people just need to care more about each other. It's not this individualistic thing. It's not about how much Corona has impacted my life. It's about, this is a group effort. We all just got to buckle up and get through it.
I think one big like learning curve for me at least was finding out how many different privileges I hold. I mean, white privilege, male privilege, able-bodied privilege, wealth privilege. There's a plethora of things that, I mean, you can take each one in a certain situation or them all together. And that was just something like I never really thought about until you realize it, and then you're like, of course.